I used to think my family was normal. Messy sometimes, sure, but normal. We ate dinner together most nights. My mom worked at the hospital, my dad had his accounting firm, and I went to school and complained about homework like everyone else. The worst fights I ever witnessed between them were about bills or whether dad forgot to take out the trash again. Nothing unusual, nothing sinister. At least, that's what I thought. It started with a box. An old cardboard box shoved so far back in the attic that I had to move Christmas decorations and a stack of yellowing newspapers to get to it. I wasn't snooping. I wasn't looking for secrets. I was looking for my grandmother's recipe book, the one Mom swore she'd tucked away after our last Thanksgiving. The box was heavier than it looked. I dragged it out into the light filtering through the attic window, and dust coated my hands instantly. Across the top, written in my father's blocky handwriting, were the words, Tax Documents, 1994-1997. That would have been boring if it weren't for one detail. My parents didn't even meet until 1999. I knew because Mom used to tell me the story of how they met like it was her favorite fairy tale. She was a new nurse. Dad had come into the ER with a broken wrist after falling off a ladder. He was embarrassed, she was amused, and he asked her out before they even set the bone. That was 1999. I'd heard that story so many times, it might as well have been etched into my memory. So why would there be a box of documents from years earlier labeled in Dad's handwriting, hidden away where no one would find it? I should have left it alone. God, I wish I had. But curiosity has always been my weakness. I sat down, cross-legged, on the attic floor and pried it open. Inside wasn't paperwork. Not just paperwork, at least. There were folders, sure, but also photos. A stack of Polaroids bound together with a rubber band so brittle, it snapped when I touched it. They spilled across the floor like dropped playing cards. And that's when my stomach flipped. In the photos, my father was smiling. Younger, thinner, but undeniably him. His arm was around a woman I had never seen before in my life. Dark hair, sharp cheekbones, and a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. She wasn't Mom. But the worst part wasn't that he was with another woman. The worst part was that there was a little boy in some of the photos too. A boy with the same brown eyes I saw in the mirror every morning. I froze. My hands shook so badly that one of the photos slipped between my fingers. I picked it up again, staring at the child's face. He looked maybe 4 or 5. He wasn't me, I knew that much. But he looked like me. Like us. It felt like the attic was closing in on me, the dust clogging my throat, the silence pressing against my ears. I shoved everything back in the box and stumbled downstairs. For the rest of the day, I couldn't focus. I kept replaying the images in my head. My father with another woman, a child, another life. That night at dinner, I studied them like I'd never seen them before. Mom ladled soup into bowls. Dad made a dumb joke about how her cooking could cure any illness. They smiled at each other, like nothing was wrong. I almost blurted it out right then. I almost slammed the photo on the table and demanded answers. But something in the way Mom laughed, that unguarded, real laugh, stopped me. If she didn't know, then dropping the truth into her lap like that would destroy her. And if she did know, then what did that mean about everything we were? I barely slept. I tossed and turned, the image of that boy's face etched behind my eyelids. By morning, I had convinced myself maybe I was overreacting. Maybe it wasn't what it looked like. Maybe it was an old friend, a cousin, something I hadn't been told. Families were complicated, right? So I tried to push it down. For a week, I said nothing. But once you've seen something like that, you can't unsee it. The cracks started showing in ways I hadn't noticed before. The hushed phone calls Dad took late at night, stepping onto the porch where he thought I couldn't hear. The way Mom's expressions sometimes hardened when she thought no one was watching. And then, 2 weeks later, everything exploded. It was a Saturday morning. The smell of pancakes filled the kitchen, Dad humming some off-key tune while flipping them on the stove. The doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone, so I opened it without thinking. A woman stood there. The woman from the photographs. She hadn't aged well. Her hair was streaked with gray, her face drawn, but I knew her instantly. And beside her stood a boy, older now, maybe 16. My stomach dropped. It was the same boy from the photos, only taller, broader. His resemblance to Dad was unmistakable. "Is your father home?" the woman asked. Her voice was sharp, no nonsense. I couldn't answer. My throat had closed up. Behind me, I heard Dad's voice, casual at first. "Who's at the door?" Then silence. Utter silence. When he saw her, the color drained from his face. The spatula slipped from his hand, clattering to the floor. "Lena," he said, barely a whisper. Mom appeared from the hallway, confused by the commotion. She looked from Dad to the woman to the boy. Her smile faltered. "What's going on?" And that was the moment I realized everything I thought I knew about my family was built on a lie. The woman stepped inside, without waiting for an invitation. The boy followed, his eyes flicking between me and Dad. He looked angry. No, not just angry. Betrayed. "You thought you could just disappear," the woman said. Her voice shook with fury. "You thought you could start over like none of it happened. But he deserves the truth. We deserve the truth." Mom's voice wavered. "David, What is she talking about? Dad looked at all of us like a trapped animal, sweat beading on his forehead. It's not what you think, he stammered, but it was. The boy stepped forward, his jaw clenched. You're my father, aren't you? The silence that followed was unbearable. I could hear the clock ticking on the wall. I could hear my own heartbeat. And then, Dad said the word that shattered everything. Yes. The sound of Mom's gasp was like glass breaking. My knees went weak. That was how it began. That was the day my parents' secret past walked through our front door and turned my life into a nightmare. The silence after Dad's confession wasn't really silence at all. It was heavy breathing, the hum of the refrigerator, the faint crackle of pancakes burning on the stove. But in my memory, it plays like someone pressed mute on the world. My mom's face went slack, pale, like she'd just been punched. You, she whispered. Then louder, sharper. You have a son? Dad stepped toward her, hands out like he could contain the damage with a gesture. It was before I met you, Marie. Before you met me? She snapped. Her voice broke, tears already welling in her eyes. We've been married 20 years, David. 20 years. And you never thought I deserved to know that you had a child? The boy, God, I couldn't even say his name yet because I didn't know it, stood stiff as a board. His jaw worked like he was biting back words, but his eyes betrayed him. They were wet, furious, pleading. When his gaze landed on me, it was like looking into a distorted mirror. This is your family, the woman, Lena, said. She jabbed a finger toward me. Your other son. He got to have you. He got to know you. And mine? Mine grew up with nothing but questions. My stomach twisted. For a second, I thought I might throw up right there on the tile. I wanted to protest, to deny it. But the resemblance was undeniable. Mom turned to Dad. Tell me this isn't true. Tell me she's lying. He didn't. He just lowered his head. Her sob cracked something inside me. She stumbled backward, bracing herself against the wall, her whole body shaking. Lena's lips curled. See? Truth has a way of catching up. Shut up, Dad snapped, his first flash of anger, but it sounded hollow. The boy finally spoke. His voice was deep, rough, and carried more pain than any teenager should ever have to hold. My name is Aaron, and you're my father. I couldn't look away from him. The air felt too thick to breathe. Aaron. His name was Aaron. My brother. Mom fled the room then. She didn't slam the door, didn't scream, didn't throw anything. She just walked down the hall like a ghost and disappeared into her bedroom. The click of the lock echoed like a gunshot. I wanted to follow her, to comfort her. But my legs wouldn't move. Dad rubbed his forehead. Lena, this isn't the place. Not the place? Lena barked out a bitter laugh. You think you get to decide that after hiding from us for 16 years? After leaving me to raise him alone while you played perfect husband and father here? Dad's hands trembled. I sent money. Money? Her voice dripped with venom. Do you think money raises a child? Do you think checks in the mail make up for birthdays? For scraped knees? For nights he asked me why his father didn't want him? Aaron's face tightened, like he'd heard that speech too many times already. But his eyes still searched Dad's, desperate for something. Acknowledgement, apology, anything. And then, finally, Dad looked at him. Really looked. His lips parted, but no words came out. That's when I realized he wasn't just ashamed, he was terrified. The next hours blurred into chaos. Lena refused to leave. Mom refused to come out. Dad tried to juggle us all, but his mask kept slipping. I caught whispers between him and Lena when they thought I wasn't listening. Words like agreement, deal, papers. Things that didn't sound like family, but like business. By evening, Mom emerged from the bedroom, her eyes swollen but dry. She didn't look at Dad. She didn't look at me. She looked at Lena and Aaron. Stay for dinner, she said flatly. Everyone froze. I said stay, Mom repeated, her voice hollow. If this is happening, if this is real, then we're going to face it as a family. All of us. And so we sat at the table, me, Dad, Mom, Lena, and Aaron, like some grotesque parody of normalcy. Plates clinked, silverware scraped. No one ate much. Aaron sat across from me. Every time our eyes met, it felt like a challenge. Like he was daring me to prove I deserved the life he didn't get. Lena talked the most, filling the silence with stories of Aaron's childhood, each one edged with accusation. How he learned to ride a bike without a dad to cheer him on. How he asked about the man in the photographs she eventually tore up. How every Father's Day he asked why his didn't care. Mom listened without blinking, her face unreadable. Dad kept trying to interject, but she silenced him with a glance. By dessert, though no one touched it, tension snapped. Aaron put down his fork. His knuckles were white. Why didn't you want me? The question hung in the air, raw and bare. Dad swallowed hard. I did. I always did. But things were complicated. Complicated? Aaron's voice cracked. I spent my whole life thinking I wasn't good enough. That I wasn't worth sticking around for. And you call that complicated? I wanted to defend him. Or maybe I wanted to defend myself, because part of me felt guilty for even existing, for being the child he stayed for. But before I could speak, Mom did something that shocked us all. She reached across the table and grabbed Aaron's hand. You deserved better, she said softly. Lena froze. Dad flinched. And Aaron, he just stared at her, wide-eyed, like those words were the first kindness he'd ever been offered from this side of the family. For a moment, I thought maybe, we'd find a way forward. But then Mom's eyes cut to Dad, and her tone turned to ice. And you will explain everything, David. Because this, she gestured between Aaron and me, isn't just betrayal. This is a lie that's been festering for 16 years. And I will not live another day in a house built on rot. That night, Lena and Aaron left, but not before Aaron gave me one last look at the door. Not anger this time, not challenge, something heavier. A promise that this wasn't over. And he was right, because the nightmare was only beginning. The next morning, the house was quiet, but it wasn't peaceful. It was the kind of quiet that settles after an explosion, where the dust is still in the air, and you're waiting to see what's left standing. Mom was already in the kitchen, making coffee like she always did, but everything about her was wrong. Her movements were sharp, mechanical, like she wasn't actually there. When I sat down at the counter, she pushed a mug toward me without looking. "Did you sleep?" I asked. She didn't answer. Dad came in a few minutes later, his hair a mess, his shirt wrinkled. He looked like he hadn't slept at all either. He opened his mouth, maybe to apologize, maybe to explain, but Mom cut him off with 3 words. "Tell him everything." At first, I thought she meant me, but no, she meant Aaron. Dad blinked. "Marie, please." "Not me," she snapped. Her voice was low, dangerous. "Your son. Both of them." And that's when I realized she'd already called Lena, already set the stage for round 2 of destruction. By noon, they were back. Aaron walked into the house like he belonged there, his eyes scanning everything with an edge of hunger, like he was memorizing what could have been his. Lena followed, chin high, smug in the knowledge that she had the upper hand. We sat in the living room this time, all of us on different pieces of furniture, like rival tribes negotiating peace. "Talk," Mom demanded, and so Dad did. He told us how he and Lena had been high school sweethearts, how their relationship had been messy, on again, off again, how she'd gotten pregnant right before he left for college, how he panicked, how his own parents pressured him to focus on his future. Lena scoffed at that, but she didn't interrupt. He admitted he sent money, but never enough, never consistent, always more about easing his guilt than helping them live. And then, when he met Mom, he buried it, pretended Aaron didn't exist, built a new life, and prayed the old one wouldn't come crashing down. Listening to him, I felt something break inside me, because it wasn't just Aaron he abandoned, it was the truth. And now, that truth was in the room, breathing, glaring, demanding space. Aaron sat forward, elbows on his knees. His voice was steady, but his hands trembled. "So I was a mistake." "No," Dad said quickly. "You were never a mistake. I was." Aaron laughed bitterly. "That's supposed to make me feel better?" Lena's eyes flashed. "He doesn't need your pity. He needs what's owed to him." "What's owed?" Mom's voice cut like a blade. Lena met her stare. "Recognition, support, maybe even a share of what you've built here. Don't act surprised. You can't erase him from existence just because it's inconvenient." The word share hung in the air like poison. Dad shifted uncomfortably. "This isn't about money, isn't it?" Lena snapped. "You think you get to choose now? You made your choice 16 years ago. You left us with scraps." He grew up watching other kids with dads who showed up, who cared, who provided. And what did he get? Silence. Excuses. "Now, maybe it's time you pay what you owe." Mom stood. "You will not come into my house and talk about shares like this is some business arrangement. My son," she pointed at me, "will not have his life torn apart because of your bitterness." Aaron's head whipped toward me. "Your son? He's your son. And what am I then? Trash on the doorstep? You don't even know me, but you've already decided where I belong." The venom in his voice shocked me. For the first time, his anger wasn't just for Dad, it was for me. And it hit me, hard, that in his eyes, I was the replacement, the stand-in, the one who got the life he should have had. That night, I found a note slipped under my bedroom door. The handwriting was jagged, hurried. "You don't deserve him any more than I do." It wasn't signed, but it didn't need to be. The days that followed blurred together in a nightmare rhythm. Lena and Aaron kept coming back, sometimes invited, sometimes not. Mom and Dad fought constantly, whispers shouting in their bedroom when they thought I couldn't hear. Every word seeped through the walls anyway. Words like custody, rights, lawyers. Aaron hovered at the edges of my life, watching, waiting. In school hallways, at basketball practice, even outside my part-time job, he was there. Not always close, but always visible. A shadow I couldn't shake. One evening, as I was leaving work, he cornered me in the parking lot. "You think you're better than me?" he asked. His tone was low, dangerous. I froze. "No, I don't think that." "You had him," Aaron spat. "His time, his love, his stupid little family dinners. You had everything that should have been mine." I tried to steady my voice. "I didn't ask for that. I didn't choose it." He stepped closer. His breath was hot with anger. "But you lived it. And now you're going to feel what it's like to lose it." Chills shot down my spine. When I got home, Mom was waiting at the kitchen table, her eyes red, her hands gripping a mug of untouched coffee. "What's wrong?" she asked immediately. I wanted to tell her, wanted to unload the fear coiling in my chest. But when I opened my mouth, the words stuck. Because what could she do? She was drowning already, so I just said, "Nothing." But it wasn't nothing. It was everything. The breaking point came 2 weeks later. We came home from school to find the living room trashed. Papers everywhere. Furniture overturned. Mom's jewelry box smashed open. Heirlooms gone. And on the wall, scrawled in black marker, "He chose you." My blood ran cold. Dad called the police. They asked questions, took photos, filed a report. But I knew who it was. I didn't need proof. That night, while the house still smelled of chaos and fear, my phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "This is just the start." My hands shook as I read it. And deep down, I knew my brother wasn't bluffing. This wasn't about family anymore. It was about war. The night after the break-in, none of us slept. Every creak of the house felt like footsteps. Every passing car made the dog bark. I sat on the couch with a baseball bat across my lap, pretending I could protect us if it came to that. Mom dozed fitfully in the recliner, jerking awake at the smallest sound. Dad paced, muttering about calling the police again, about buying cameras, about moving. But deep down, I knew none of that would stop Aaron. The next morning, Dad went to the hardware store and came back with locks, alarms, and motion sensors. He drilled and hammered until the house looked less like a home and more like a fortress. Mom cooked breakfast she didn't eat, her eyes darting to the windows every few seconds. And me? I just kept waiting for the next hit. It came sooner than I thought. At school, a teacher pulled me aside. "Your brother came by this morning," she said casually, not realizing the weight of her words. "Said you forgot your lunch?" My stomach dropped. Aaron wasn't even a student there. How had he gotten in? When I checked my locker, I found a brown paper bag sitting neatly on the top shelf. My hands shook as I opened it. Inside wasn't food. It was a photo, me, asleep in my bed. The note on the back read, "You're not safe anywhere." That night, I locked my bedroom door for the first time in my life. But even then, sleep was impossible. Every sound in the dark turned into him. Every shadow stretched long like his presence. Mom noticed the change. She cornered Dad in the kitchen, her voice sharp but breaking. "This is your fault. You brought this into our lives. You lied. You left a child to rot, and now he's come back to collect." Dad's reply was a whisper, but I heard it anyway. "What do you want me to do? He's my son." "He's not our son," she hissed. "He's a stranger, and he's dangerous." That word stuck with me. Dangerous. Because it was true. A week later, the danger became undeniable. We came home from the grocery store to find the house silent. Too silent. The dog didn't bark. That was the first red flag. Then Mom gasped. The back door was wide open. Inside, the living room was spotless. Too clean. Like someone had been there and tidied up after themselves. On the coffee table sat another photo. This time of all three of us, taken from outside the window while we ate dinner. My throat went dry. Dad snatched up the photo, his face pale. He muttered something about calling the detective assigned to the case, but before he could dial, the landline rang. We all jumped. Mom answered. At first, she didn't speak, just listened. Then her hand flew to her mouth, and she staggered back against the wall. When she finally handed the phone to Dad, her face was white as paper. "It's him," she whispered. I strained to hear, but Dad didn't put it on speaker. He just stood there, silent, while Aaron's voice spilled venom into his ear. Finally, Dad shouted, "Don't you dare threaten my family again!" and slammed the phone down. But the damage was done. Aaron had made his intentions clear. He wasn't just here to scare us. He wanted to dismantle us, piece by piece, until there was nothing left. That night, I couldn't take it anymore. I grabbed my bike and rode to the park where Aaron used to linger after school. Sure enough, he was there, sitting on the swings, smoking a cigarette like he had all the time in the world. "You're ruining my life," I said, breathless from the ride. He smirked. "Funny, that's exactly how I feel about yours." I wanted to hit him, wanted to scream. Instead, I asked, "What do you want from us?" His eyes gleamed in the dark. "Justice." "For what?" "For existing without me, for pretending I never happened." "You think this is justice? Terrorizing us? Breaking in?" He leaned closer, his voice low and icy. "You have no idea what I'm capable of." I biked home faster than I'd ever ridden in my life. When I told Mom, she broke. Tears streamed down her face as she whispered, "He's not going to stop until he destroys us." She was right. The final straw came 3 nights later. I woke to smoke. At first, I thought it was a dream, but then the alarms blared, and Dad was yelling, and flames licked the curtains in the living room. We stumbled out into the cold night, coughing, choking, watching our house burn. And across the street, under the streetlight, stood Aaron. Just watching. The police caught him before he could run. But his smile, God, that smile, burned into my memory more than the fire. In court, weeks later, I sat behind Mom and Dad as Aaron faced the judge. He showed no remorse, no fear. When they read out the charges, arson, harassment, breaking and entering, he turned in his seat and locked eyes with me. Then he mouthed 3 words. "This isn't over." And I believed him. Because secrets don't just ruin families. They create monsters. And my parents' secret had created mine. My brother. My nightmare.